Congressman Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He's a current member and the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus, the chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. His website is Pocan, Pocan.house.gov. And over on Blue Sky, it's also Pocan.house.gov. Congressman, welcome back to the program. How are you, and what's on your mind this morning? Or
hey, Tom, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it. You know, this week is this may be the most ridiculous week I've had in Washington, Tom. What we're voting on, the two major pieces of legislation are Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And we have a bill going after 5 universities that have the Confucius Institute presence on their campuses. And that's the meaningful stuff we're doing this week in Congress. So it's just another day watching them try to figure out how they're going to take away healthcare and food assistance and education funding from people. And they just can't figure their way out of a paper bag. So I'm here and, going to make sure we take care of the Gulf.
Now, they laid out this framework for the budget, and I understand Trump's budget, the House's budget, and the Senate's budget might all be different. Please clarify that for me. But also, in that framework, which didn't have specifics, it did call for, reducing government spending by a mind-boggling amount of money, and implied about $800 billion of that should come out of Medicaid. At some point, they're going to have to lay out the details. When does that happen? Where do we see that? Where are we at with this process right now?
Yeah, so you're right. They wanted to cut $1.5 trillion to help fund the $5.5 trillion tax cut for the wealthiest. And by doing so, they would cut things like Medicaid, which is healthcare and long-term care, cut education funding, cut food assistance programs, and cut some of the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So they set target numbers per committee, so we know they have to cut Medicaid based on those numbers, for example. But the devil's in the details. And this week, they canceled 3 subcommittees that were going to mark up what those details are, because even among Republicans, they're having problems with cuts to Medicaid, for example. I mean, if you're David Valadao from California and over 60% of your constituents are on Medicaid, do you think that's an easy vote? It should be, right? So they're having a hard time meeting their goals. We know they all voted for those cuts, the amounts, but now actually putting that onto paper is the difficulty they're having.
Yeah. So do you think that they'll actually do it? I mean, are they actually going to cut Medicaid? And if so, will there be a large fine? Also, remind me to ask you about Don Bacon in just a second. But first off, do you think, will they actually cut Medicaid? And I mean, they're already going after a lot of other good programs.
Yeah, so I have bad choices and worse choices every day when I go to work, and I'm all for the bad choices. The bad choices to me are stopping the cuts to Medicaid and to food assistance and education. And if we can do that, I think ultimately they may just try to put, the tax cuts on the national debt like they did the last time. But at least no one's going to get hurt right now who needs health care or who needs food assistance of $6.20 a day, a very, very small amount. But I think, they probably have the votes to do the tax cuts. This funding, though, is the difficulty because, again, the details always are what matter. And, Donald Trump and his team don't really have a plan. They have a concept of a plan.
What are the chances that we run all the way to, I guess, the end of this month or maybe the end of next month at the worst? We're already operating, and I'm surprised the media hasn't been talking about this like they have during budget crises in the past. But my recollection is that since January or February, we're running in negative territory. The government funding has expired, and they're moving money around in the Treasury Department to make sure that the bills get paid. And at a certain point, we're going to just run out of money, and the government is going to freeze up, right?
Yeah, and this is where the president's marionette, the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Dissent, has to make that call. And, when he was asked yesterday in a committee I serve on, he gave quite a bit of tap dancing as an answer because they don't know because they're trying to get this bill done, which they could then lift the debt ceiling with the bill. But so far, they're not close to having resolution. So I think they'll play a lot of accounting tricks along the way.
Well, and that video of you interviewing Scott Bessent has gone completely viral. where you repeatedly asked him who pays for tariffs. You want to tell us how he answered?
Yeah. So, honestly, Tom, I wanted to get to other questions about tariffs. I thought that was the simple one, and the simple one stumped him, and he didn't want to answer who pays for tariffs because ultimately we all know who does. We do. Consumers do. Yes, an importer technically, but that cost gets passed on and we all pay for tariffs. But he doesn't want to admit that, as much as Donald Trump actually did. I mean, Donald Trump proved his affection for North Korea when he started rationing dolls and pencils, right? Saying that that's probably what's going to happen because of tariffs. He's finally admitting we're going to pay more, but I don't think the American people signed up to pay more so that Donald Trump can kind of throw these tariffs around indiscriminately without a plan. So I think the secretary, who is a very smart man, rather than lying in front of Congress, just gave his answer because he can't say the truth, which is we as consumers pay Trump's tariffs. They're a tax on us.
Right. And they're basically paid for. I mean, in fact, they are paid for by the companies that do the importing, not by the companies that do the exporting. So.
So no country. Remember when Trump said China would pay for it? No, of course not. That's about as idiotic as saying Canada's going to become the 51st state. It's not going to happen.
No, it's going to be Mattel and last question. Don Bacon has this started last week, where he spoke out against the tariffs, and then the next day said maybe I won't run for re-election. I think maybe Elon Musk called him up and said, okay, there's a target on your back now. Do you think that we're starting to see Republicans peel off from Trump? And is there any possibility that over the next, over the near term or even the long term, we've got 4 years of this nonsense, or at least a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half until the midterms, that you might see 3 or 4 or 5 Republicans basically defect in the House or maybe even in the Senate and join Democrats in the way that they're voting? And could that change leadership in the House? Or am I just dreaming?
If you won by less than 10 points and you are concerned about being reelected, you should be concerned about what they're doing right now, because their agenda is not popular. And people haven't felt the cuts yet in many cases because they haven't happened. We're feeling the extra cost because of tariffs, but not the cuts. But when people feel those, the price to be paid is even more. So I think, Representative Bacon just is understanding what his crystal ball says, is that, he's not likely to get reelected if they pass this agenda. And he's kind of speaking out, but, not nearly enough. But I think a lot more members are going to realize their political futures are going to take a crash dive based on what they're going to try to do in the next month or two.
Wow, the next month or two. It's an interesting time to be alive, as the old saying goes.
And interesting, that's a Chinese curse, they always say, right? And here we are with tariffs in China. Go figure.
There you go. The irony is perfect.
Parody. Yeah.
Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. It's our Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann program. We'll be right back with your calls. We have a full board of calls from coast to coast for Congressman Mark Pocan. Stay with us. And welcome back. Ziggy and Mark, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman. My question is, who is going to pay the tariffs on prescription drugs for Medicare Part D? As I understand it, the insurance companies are not going to pay it. Medicare is not going to pay it. And so what it means is I'm going to have to pay $108 for my heart medication, which currently does not cost me anything on Medicare Part D. Do you have any insight in that, please?
I don't have extra insight other than what you said, just because we don't know where the tariffs are on any given day. They're on, they're off, some are on, some are off. I compare it somewhat, crudely to how a monkey throws its dung. You don't know where the tariffs are going to land, but we know it's going to be messy. And that's what we're experiencing with every single tariff right now. So, at the end of the day, we know someone has to pick it up. At the end, it's the final, probably the consumer that picks it up. But whether that gets paid for along the way by one of those entities for prescription drugs or just us in the very end, it will get paid for. That's the only certainty.
I'm surprised Drudge hasn't picked that up. Congressman calls Trump a monkey throwing dung. That's a good one. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, America. Nice analogy with the monkey throwing dung and the tariffs, by the way. I was thinking like a Jackson Pollock painting, but I think my
you
question for you, my question, Congressman, is with all the with all the cyber scams that are affecting people, I think it's in the billions of dollars a year. Do you think it would be a good idea if we had something like a Department of Digital Security to help protect American citizens? And particularly the elderly part of our society, or seem to be getting disproportionately ripped off and taken advantage of. That's my question. Have a great day.
Thanks. Isn't that the agency that Chris Krebs used to run?
Yeah, I don't know. I missed the very first part of his question. It was a little bit choppy.
He was asking about, he said, with all the scams going on right now, wouldn't it be useful to have a Department of Digital Security?
Yeah, I mean, well, just, someone who fights for consumers we had, right? And we don't have now under the Trump administration. So, and it's going to get worse. Tom, my real fear is with AI, you can now, with 15 seconds of capturing someone's voice, you can have it read a script that you have. And, already when older folks get a call from their grandson who's in jail asking for money, this time it's going to actually be their voice asking for that. And, there's a lot that we have to be able to keep on top of, because that's what your government does. That's what your taxpayer dollars should do, is protect you in that way. And here we are with DOGE and the Trump administration throwing away all those kind of goalies that we had in place.
Yeah, and Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the Cybersecurity Office. I understand that also the FBI is dialing back on their efforts to stop Russian disinformation in the United States.
Yeah, I saw something on that. I mean, there's so much, Tom, right now that we can barely even keep up with what they're cutting. And, you pay your tax dollars and expect something other than defense of the nation, right? You expect the programs, especially people value Social Security and Medicare, but so many other things that you don't think of, and they're just destroying on a regular basis.
Amazing. We'll be back with Congressman Mark Pocan in 60 seconds, right after I read an ad over on the commercial side. You'll hear a promo on this end, and we'll be right back. Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. And Amy in Madison, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah. Hi, Congressman Pocan and Thom Hartmann. My question is about Medicaid. Are there any kinds of Medicaid that they prefer or don't prefer? Would they rather? I mean, are they cutting the 50% for the people that didn't extend Medicaid, or are they only after the Obama Medicaid? Do you know anything about that and what they feel about waiver programs for the elderly? Are there any things they feel worse about cutting than others? Thank you.
Yeah, Amy, thank you. Great to have a constituent who's listening calling. Amy, so we don't know. That's part of their problem, right? They've put out various proposals. They're having some resistance. All they need are 3 Republican members of the House to have resistance, and they can stop these things. That's why our activism in the next month or two is so very important as they're moving this forward. And but we don't know exactly what they're going to do. They may do per capita limits. They may do some other things that are out there. But right now, we haven't seen the proposal because they had to cancel their markup in committee because they don't have the votes to do any cuts yet. So keep that pressure on. I think that's why we're winning on this. That's why they can't vote yet on this. And hopefully, at the end of the day, we can stop cuts or largely stop cuts. So we don't know, but keep calling and tell them, don't cut your Medicaid, don't cut your food assistance, don't cut education funding, don't cut subsidies to the Affordable Care Act.
Morris in Inglewood, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, everybody within the sound of my voice. Congressman, check this out. I'm sure you're familiar with, I'm hoping you are, with a General Michael Langley. General Michael Langley, he worked for us. He went over to a place called Burkina Faso, Africa, and he tried to demonize a fellow by the name of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And, of course, it backfired. The general had to apologize for it. But what I found out, though, by accident, that all those activities, those rebels that you see over in Africa, the General Langley, our general, he trains. And he gives them equipment and uniforms. All those people in the Congo, north side of Burkina Faso. I was wondering if you knew about that. And all that's possible because, Tom, you remember this. Remember Nixon's secret bombing? So it's quite possible a lot of things are going on that we don't know about. But Congressman, are you familiar with what Michael Langley is doing in Africa? And I'll talk to you later. Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah, Morris, no, it's not on my general committee's jurisdiction, so I don't have any extra information for you on that. I apologize. I do know that, we always have to be careful if we have anything that any people or even the government itself training people abroad. I mean, back in the day, I went down to protest at the School of Americas when we were training folks to do bad things. And, now that a lot of this is freelanced, we just have to always be vigilant and on top of this, especially if something's being done with, U.S. Skills that people learn through our government.
Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, greetings, gents. Thanks for taking my call, and thank you, Mark, for being a wonderful congressman. This tariff stuff has been burning my brain because we know that they're going to be bearing additional costs in there, just like they did during the pandemic. And by the way, I saw your clip with taking down Bessa yesterday. That was awesome. Thank you so much. So I was wondering if the Democrats would consider at least trying to put forward a bill, and it's probably not going to pass, of putting the Republicans on the line about the tariffs and putting in an anti-price gouging clause or a situation or something like that, because we don't want to go through what we did in the pandemic where, billionaires walked out with even more money before. And part of that bill could include showing what every consumer that gets a receipt, that tariff that they are paying would be on that receipt. Just want to see if you guys would consider sticking it to the Republicans and then making a big deal out of it.
Yeah, so we can introduce bills, but they may not go anywhere. That's part of the problem with not being in the majority right now. However, we are trying to work on getting congressional authority back on tariffs. We're the ones supposed to be having the power on this, and we've largely given it up to Donald Trump because that's how the majority party has been. Article 1 of the Constitution, appropriations, we've also given up our authority there and let him cut these programs in the worst ways. So all of that is something that, we are trying to do through some different ways. And I know we need to be able to do more. The problem is you saw what happened to Amazon. They were going to put down a tariff surcharge, and then Trump, of course, scared them away. And, that billionaire, like other multimillionaires, will probably cave when he says that because they know that their tax cut at the end of the day takes care of them. So we just need to keep talking about it. I really did think when the secretary, it surprised me that he could not answer something so simple. My guess is, Tom, that he thought he was under oath and therefore he had to tell the truth, and he's not used to that. Fox News doesn't require that when he's on there. And I think that's really what made him stumble.
That's an interesting insight. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann program. Congressman Pocan, the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan in just a moment. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Pocan.house.gov is both the website and his handle over on Blue Sky. Check it out. Mark Pocan on the line with us. It's Middays with Mark, taking your calls for the hour, the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Susie in Gig Harbor, Washington, you are on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hey, thank you, Fun. Anyhow, so I'm terrible with names, but a couple of weeks ago, or maybe not that long, there was a gentleman, Democrat, stood up. There was some ludicrous bill, and it had to do with that poor child that had cancer that got deported. And so the Democrat gentleman stood up and said, raise your hands if, basically, if you think this is a good idea, if you don't think it's a good idea. And it put, even though they vote and you don't see it, to put them on the spot like that and watch whether they raise their hands for ludicrous ideas or don't raise their hands, I thought it was visually just good. I mean, like, call them out, make them do it, raise your hands. So do that more, I guess, is my question. Will you do that more?
You, Susie. I'll tell you, my ask of my leadership is, I think the week that we're home from Memorial Day, we should do like 250 town halls across the country that week. Every Democrat who can should do one, and then go into 30 or 50 Republican districts and do one, since they're afraid to have a town hall. Because it's he said, she said, it's this much money, it's this program, you can get lost in the ether. But what everyone understands is that if you're really proud of something that people are going to like, you want to brag about it, and you should get on the rooftop and scream about it. But instead, if you're afraid to have a town hall and you're hiding in your basement, it doesn't pass the smell test. So if we did this across the country, and it would send the singular message that they are lying. And that way, as they start to lie, they'll already be called out about it. I just think being aggressive at going into Republican districts is the single best thing that we can do right now. And the more of us that do it, the better it will be.
Patrick in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Representative Pocan, I felt represented yesterday. I really appreciate the questions you put to Treasury Secretary Besson. I felt well served. Last night, you also mentioned on Lawrence O'Donnell's show that the half of the Trump voters were strictly economic voters. I shouldn't say strictly, were predominantly economic voters, and that the tactic of attacking, and rightly so, the trillions of dollars of loss due to Trump policies is where we are right now. As a black man, my main concern is really with some of these cultural issues, which are still we're having successes with. I believe a lot of Trump voters did vote, to create second-class citizens out of black people, out of immigrants, out of gay people, and the like. In leadership, what are your thoughts on where we can go to start tackling those things? I mean, you just used the term "lost in the ether." Some of these cultural issues, particularly at the Department of Defense, seem to be gaining some ground. So, what can we look forward as far as Democratic leadership to tackle that going into the midterms? Thanks.
Yeah, Patrick, I think a big part right now that we need to talk about, Donald Trump won because half of the voters in the exit polls said they voted on the economy. And now, and he promised to lower costs. And now it's just the opposite. He did nothing to lower costs, and we're paying more because of tariffs. And it got so bad that last week, Donald Trump finally admitted that we're paying more for tariffs. And he started talking about having $2 instead of 30 and 5 pencils. He's now literally taking on North Korean rationing policies as his answer in order to fund a tax break for the wealthiest. So I just want to keep repeating that, because even if you are a racist who voted for Trump because he will enact racist policies, when you're limiting what you can give your kids at Christmas and how many pencils you can use, you might be less of a racist, right? So I want to focus on those core economic issues because Trump is terrible on them. He's costing the American people. We're paying more, not less. That home, I think he's going to have a much harder time enacting all the racist and other things that he's doing. So, let's just keep the focus on economics, because this is his literally worst area.
Tim in Aberdeen, Arkansas, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Mr. Pocan, the picture that they showed here, I don't know, just a few days ago with Trump dressed up as the Pope, it seems to have disappeared. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I hope they were smart enough to make it disappear. God, this is a guy. Not only does he want to be king, now he wants to be the Pope. At some point, doesn't matter how much you are a racist and supported Trump for that reason, do you say, oh my God, this is even more embarrassing than I expected, right? You're going to pay more for things. You're being rationed on what you can give out at Christmas. And now he's insulting your religion because he thinks that he should be the Pope. At some point, people will wake up. It's not enough yet, but we just need to keep driving this home.
Ardeen in Colorado Springs, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, good morning, you guys, or good afternoon. I don't know which time zone we're in here. I was just wondering, what on the protest that we've been doing, what effect is it doing to the people that need to hear us? Is it making an effect? Are we making an effect? Are they beginning to get worried, or what?
Yeah, clearly they are. Look at that election we had in Wisconsin, where way more people came out than we ever expected, Democrats or Republicans. It's because people weren't being heard, and that was the only way to be heard. So people are absolutely scared when we're out there talking. I just think right now, literally this week and next week and the following week, we got to keep calling our federal elected officials and say, don't cut Medicaid, don't cut food assistance, don't cut education, don't cut the Affordable Care Act. Those are the big four that they're trying to cut to pay for this tax cut for the wealthiest. And we will fight back, and I think we'll be victorious on this. Right now, they're canceling markup hearings because they don't have enough members who will go along with this, even though they already voted to cut the amounts. They're now realizing that they're in trouble, and they're afraid to do town halls. So keep it up. It's really vital that we keep the pressure on, because the next month or two will determine much of how this nation's going to move forward and how we're going to treat people who need help the most.
Just a quick question here from the moderator. If they can't pull it together to come up with a budget that, accomplishes what, that gives Elon Musk and Donald Trump the tax breaks they want, all that sort of thing, do you think that they'll just pass a continuing resolution come June or July or whatever, or will they let the government go into default? How do you see this playing out?
I don't think they'll get into default yet, because that's one thing the secretary yesterday also tried to evade that question, because he'll be the person who'll tell you when we have to lift the debt ceiling or when we've, hit that barrier. But I think I personally think that they're going to do the tax cut regardless. And if they have to just put it on the national debt like they did the last time, they will. Yeah. But you know what? I have bad choices and worse choices every day I go into work these days. My bad choices are stopping them from cutting food assistance, stopping them from cutting health care and long-term care for people, stopping the education cuts. If I can do that right now, we all will be victorious on that. But I think, their holy grail is this tax cut bill, and that's who is represented in Congress, are some of the wealthiest folks in the Republican side. I think they're going to do it. Let's just make sure they don't hurt real people along the way.
Samar in Sherman Oaks, California. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If not, please correct me. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you so much for pronouncing it accurately, and thank you, Congressman, for all your services. Big fan of both of you. I'm, like millions of us, just really concerned about the level of lawlessness that is going on here. Trump feels like he can skate by, not even comply with Supreme Court, which that in itself is unprecedented. MAGA and Congress are basically his sheep, and his cabinet, they make Kim Jong-un blush at this point. So, and it feels like us Democrats are always like 2 stages behind their corruption since 2016. So I wanted to understand, does Congress have a plan to get people to protest and come together instead of addressing each corruption that, Trump administration commits if all else fails? Because, according to scholars, this now may be literally our only way out, to have everyone participate and stand up. And I don't know if we have a unifying force or voice out there other than Congress. So any plans out there?
Yeah, Samara, first of all, it's not an answer people ever like to hear, but elections have consequences, and we don't have the majority. There's not much that we can do legislatively. In fact, there's almost nothing legislatively that we can do. We can use our bully pulpits, and we should do this more. But it's the courts right now this is a nation of laws, and it's largely proving true. We've had over 60 positive adjudications, and these are old numbers. I'm sure it's more than that now, on the over now 200 legal cases that are out there. And it's even by Trump-appointed judges. It was 45, it's probably over 50 different judges right now. So it's not like one court is doing this. So the rule of law is largely holding, and we have to support those folks who are doing the litigation. And also Trump is also following those policies. He doesn't want you to know it, but he's also the caver in chief. In almost every instance, he has to follow the law. He has a few high profile ones he's pushing because for his racist base, Mr. Garcia sending to El Salvador hits all the buttons. So that's one he's still, playing the game with. But, he's just facilitate mean, et cetera, right? But largely, it is the legal system. It is our rule of law that's working. And that is the best, I think, that we have. So there's a reason why that judge in Milwaukee in my state, they went after. It's because they're trying to scare another branch of government to not do what they're doing, which is follow the rule of law. And that's why we've got to support those folks who are they're going to try to target to take away that goalie that we have in place.
There you go. 46 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Alan in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for taking my call. Congressman, you had just covered a little bit about raising the debt limit, but I'm curious if you could expand a little bit on the relationship between the budget that they're trying to get through and raising the debt limit. I mean, you really can't have this big tax cut for billionaires unless you raise the debt limit first. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and Alan, thanks for saying that. So in the Republican bill that they passed, they had lifted the debt ceiling, I think, 4 or 5 trillion. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting the exact number. But that hasn't fully passed yet because they haven't done the reconciliation bill. So either they pass this bill in the next month or two, which enables that, or they're going to have a separate vote at some point to lift the debt ceiling if they decide to just do it all on the national debt. So either way, there's going to have to be another vote. But every Republican but Thomas Massie already voted in that first bill to lift the debt ceiling. So even though some of them may claim they've never done that vote, they have. And that's why I think he'll probably be able to get them to do it no matter what when they need to. But it was not fully enacted because that was just setting up the reconciliation bill. The actual lifting happens with the reconciliation bill, which is what they're trying to get done.
Michael in Denver, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. And Representative Pocan, always great to hear you on. And I just had a quick kind of comment and question today. So I wanted to touch on this article I saw from NPR talking about Medicaid, about the work requirements. States are pushing, a lot of Republican states are pushing the Medicaid work requirements. But the problem is few Medicaid programs actually help these people find jobs. And, it's very interesting. There was an article from NPR the other week, and one of the he talked about how, his health issues, struggling to manage depression and diabetes made it really hard for him to find any type of employment while being on Medicaid. And so, my question is, what can be done to kind of alleviate some of this if work requirements for Medicaid are passed? And what do you think the likelihood is of, this ultimately happening?
Yeah. So, Michael, you're dead on how you explained why they aren't really effective. And when you look at, there's almost no savings by doing it. It's strictly done punitive as a messaging tool. So you're going to hurt real people from getting jobs because you want to say that somehow you're doing something, and yet there's almost no money that they're going to get for their tax bill out of doing it. So it'd be done to be punitive only. Your question was, what can we do to alleviate that? I don't know if I have an answer right now for that, because right now we're just trying to stop them from doing these cuts, period, to Medicaid. But you're right. Any state that's doing this, and if the federal government decides to do this, it's not for what we're saying, that we're saving money or there's waste, fraud, and abuse. It's to just be punitive and to punish people for either having health issues or other issues and aren't able to get work. It's really, the worst in the Republican Party you're seeing when they talk about that idea.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they keep claiming waste, fraud, and abuse, but they haven't prosecuted anybody for fraud. They haven't identified any specific waste, and I haven't heard a word about abuse. It looks to me like it's just they're trying to raid our databases so that Elon Musk can make another $1 trillion, but what do I know? Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Pocan. Stay with us. Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here for Congressman Mark Pocan. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. You're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hi. Thank you again, Tom, for all the work you do. And what I honor, Congressman, I want to talk about waste and mismanagement. And I'm going to say this. I live in Florida, so for 25 years I've had to witness fascism running rampant. I don't see it getting better for me, but I want to ask this question because I'm furious. What about the $30 million wasted in sending to the family of Ashley Babbitt? And what I predict is in the next weeks and months, is possibly a couple $2 billion going to every one of those insurrectionists for their pain and suffering, whereas these people who died in these service police, I didn't hear one iota coming from taxpayers to pay for their loss and suffering. I want to hear from Democrats saying that $30 million is going to be taken back one way or another. Every penny of it, I want to see back. I don't want to hear any talk about these insurrectionists getting $1 million in reparations when they scream reparations are no good for black people or Native Americans. So forgive my anger, but 40 years living in Florida will do that. Thank you, Congressman.
I hear you, Mike. And I agree with you. I'm angry about it too. I mean, this is the awfulness of what we're experiencing. But, you know, if you really want to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, Medicare Advantage, right? We're being ripped off. The companies have been accused of fraud and overcharging. It's more expensive than Medicare. And to be fair, the Trump administration is going after some that just most recently came out, but there's a lot more we could do in that area. Go after the Defense Department, where they only can account for about 30 to 35% of all their equipment. They failed 4 audits in a row. We have funded for billions of dollars amphibious vehicles that only sink. The most recent class of aircraft carrier, the Ford class aircraft carrier, when there's a toilet that gets clogged, you have to flush $400,000 worth of acids down the toilet to clear it, literally flushing money down the toilet. There is plenty of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's just not what Elon Musk is finding. I really agree with you, Tom. I think there's a lot more to this data that Elon wants. And I think with AI, since they're firing so many people, how calls come in. And at the end of the day, his AI company, watch for contracts and watch for what happens there. I just smell something funny.
Yeah, I agree. They want to replace human beings with AI, and he wants a large enough database that Donald Trump can say, oh, this person just said something bad about me on Twitter. Look them up, and they can look you up and know everything about your whole entire life to destroy you as quickly as possible. I think we're looking at Brave New World or 1984 here, but that's just me. Peter in Winchester, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. I have a couple of points I'd like to make.
Well, do you have a question for Congressman Pocan?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a question for Congressman Pocan?
Yes, I have. There's a research service that's available to everyone in Congress called the Congressional Research Service. And I'd like to ask all the Congress people, they have access to making requests to the Congressional Research Service. And I don't know how else we'll get this kind of information. But people, the Research Service needs to be asked, who are the people who are suffering now, factually, in different groups from Trump's policies? If you, now, I'm not allowed to call the Congressional Research
Yeah, I got it.
Service.
It's a great question, Peter. Thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, Peter. So CRS is great. We use it for a lot of different analysis. The thing is, it's not super quick, and we need things in a month or two. So I think right now, a lot of the think tanks that are out there are doing some of this work, and it's been very valuable to have that. And again, you know, what I tell people, Tom, is litigation and communication. Support the groups doing litigation and doing this type of research work, and then, you know, communicate it out there to fight the disinformation that's out there. So, you know, Peter makes a great point. I just think we're going to have to count on some of these outside groups for the timeliness that we need right now to get this information.
Congressman, we just have 1 minute left here before we have to wrap up this hour. You want to share your thoughts on the coming, we'll see you again in 2 weeks, in the next 2 weeks, and what we should be doing and can be doing, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, contacting members of the House and Senate, Tom, is always the most important on a regular basis right now about what's happening, these cuts. We have to defeat the cuts. Let them figure out if they're going to put a tax bill on the national debt. But between funny money with tariffs, claiming there's revenue that's not going to be there, that's going to wind up going on the debt anyway. I don't want to see people get hurt on with health care, losing their health care, long-term care, education funding, food assistance and the Affordable Care Act. So just keep, pushing those Republicans to find their conscience. And if not, let them know next November you'll remember it.
Any Republicans in particular you recommend that we reach out to?
Every Republican needs to hear this, because eventually we just need 3 in the House to stand up to show a spine. So honestly, I don't care where you live in the country, make those calls. It's really important.
Yeah, there you go. Congressman, thanks again so much for all the years you've been doing this and for showing up here every Wednesday. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. As always, enjoy it.